we have royalty here.
Yeah, we do. But go ahead and finish.
Well, we got royalty. Okay, so idea.
I'm in for story time right now.
There we go. Well, we moved from my utter sadness at not being a billionaire because of the wheelies to now my idea for All or Nothing is you have very small guerrilla style teams of photojournalists set up. All you do is record. Everything would be mobile. Everything would be cloud based. Very easy to cut together. And you just do dial-ins. They do it with the deadliest catch. They do it with ships that are out there in the middle of the Bering Sea. It's not that difficult to do. And you capture some of these great personalities. You capture some of the issues that go on as far as, teams struggling, trying to get, their legs underneath them. And you have the opportunity to capture magic. And you have Apple TV, you have the platform, you don't have any kind of crazy distribution deal you have to work through. The deal's there. And if somebody steals this idea and runs with it, and it benefits the league, and it benefits the players, and somebody out there suddenly realizes, oh, crap, who's this guy? Wait, he's really marketable. Good God, let's get him an endorsement deal. Everyone wins, right? That's what I want. I want that. I'm Mo Green. I want everybody to win. So I don't think I'm that crazy with the idea, but
no. But see, now once again, since it's 9:30 on a Friday morning, Greg Garza and his morning cup of coffee are hanging out with us, with our friends at Beyond Goals Mentoring. And since we've gone down, it's a Friday, Greg, and you know how things kind of go on Fridays. We go off the rails pretty easily.
I love it. Friday.
So, is there a soccer invention or an invention when you were growing up or playing or anything like that you had that you said, man, this would be a great idea if you could find the way to invent something? Have you ever thought about inventing something and bringing it to the masses?
I think when I was a kid, it was the string, the stretchy rope that you would tie around your ankle. That came out when I was a kid. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
You'd kick the ball and it would just spring right back to you.
Oh, yes.
But then at the end of the day, I had a pretty massive red brick wall in my driveway with a couple of windows in it as well. So that was much more useful than a string bringing a ball back, because I would kick that ball as hard as I could against that wall and just constantly work on my touch every single day. And one thing I always tell my mentees is, you have to train. The most important time to train is when nobody is watching, right? When nobody is watching, nobody tells you to go outside. Mom and dad don't tell you to go outside. You take that initiative, right? And you go, and for me, that was probably the first invention that I remember of, did I get it? Yeah, I probably had my parents buy it for me because I was a spoiled little brat, but at the same time, I think I probably used it for like less than an hour and was like, well, this isn't giving me the same benefit as a red brick wall would give me. But yeah, I think that's the one in soccer invention. I mean, you had the kickbacks, you would use the baseball nets or the baseball springs that I had. And I'd use that every once in a while when I was a kid, but nothing beats a ball in a wall, man. There's nothing better.
Jared Smith, first question for Greg Garza this morning.
Oh my God. Oh, after all that, it's a lot to unpack from the last 15 minutes. Jesus, y'all. Also, I had a hitaway that I used for the same purpose, and I concussed myself with it on the third day. There was elastic where the baseball would meet, and for some reason I wasn't paying attention when I was swinging, and I hit the elastic, and the composite metal bat just popped right back into my skull.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah. So those tools can be great, except when you're getting sloppy as an 11-year-old and you're not paying attention to what you're doing.
I actually saw something, I think it was on Instagram the other day, that a dad, he had his son in the cul-de-sac or whatever, and they had he was working on his hits baseball. I was a much more bigger baseball kid than I was soccer. So this guy had tied a fishing pole and a fishing line around the baseball, and the kid would hit it off the tee, and he would just reel it back in, so you never have to go get the ball again. So that was a pretty cool invention, and something that thinking out of the box, right? You don't have to go get all the balls; you just reel it back in. You're ready to go again.
Absolutely, Nick Leafy, go for it.
Well, is there anything that would teach you better control and touch than that ultimate fear of the first time you really whack the ball and it drives right toward the window and maybe bends away at the last minute. You're like, oh my, and thank God the ball barely misses the window, but then you learn, okay, I need to do this next time so I don't bust the windows. Now, did you break any windows, Greg?
Probably.
Statute of limitations. Go ahead.
My parents' garage does still not open correctly. 20 years later, 25 years later, and that's my fault. My dad was just, he's too cheap to ever got it fixed. But unfortunately, there were a lot of things that that wall for me, it was really funny because you see so many kids, whether it's no hard hit on the personal trainers that are out there, because I think it's so much needed. Private training is so important because you get that individual, base training, but there's so many trainings. And sometimes I do the same thing. I love to take kids out and train them individually and work on, their touches. And you see some trainers throwing out, things that they have to catch while they have the ball and they're juggling and all these different things. And you're thinking, you see all these different ladders and jumps that these kids are doing. And I saw a video by Berbatov. I'm sure everybody knows Berbatov, who, for a massive guy, the guy had amazing techers. When I remember watching him at Man U when I was a kid and just saying, holy moly, this guy's techers are unbelievable. The guy would just be able to control a ball out of the air. And he put a video, I think it was on Instagram the other day as well, of why his touch was so good, why he had such a good touch. And then we always talk about strengths. And I think one of my major strengths in my career was my touch, my technical ability, because I was always the smallest kid on the field or smallest man on the field. I had to use my technical ability to kind of, weave my way around people. And Berbatov used the example of when he was a kid, he had a wall and he would just nail the ball over and over against it, and just works, constantly on his touch. And that would be my biggest piece of advice to kids is don't worry so much about catching red, blue, or whatever penny that some coach is throwing up and while you're juggling, because, do those things sometimes help? Yeah, I guess they can. But man, so many players that were such big time players, they didn't have those things to use. And all they used was a wall and a ball, and they nailed it and smashed that ball against that wall over and over again. And at the end of the day, once you get to a certain age, it doesn't matter, what color of tube or whatever you can catch. It matters. Your touch is the most important thing. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. And yeah, I saw so much benefit when I was a kid from kicking that ball against that wall.
Jarrett Smith continues the fatal four-way on the Friday Free Kick with Greg Garza. Jarrett, what else is on your mind?
I don't know if we're going to build off this.
A rebuild? Is a rebuild into play today?
Sure.
Oh, man. I don't know we build off of this conversation. As far as you're talking about with the kids and whatnot, how are with you and with Michael and anybody else with Young Goals, how does the conversation generally go with the parents about staying on top of kids but also not being overbearing about it?
Yeah, of course. That's a huge piece, right? I'll be completely honest with you. I think there are so many parents that are living their own dreams within their kids, right? And that can be within any sport, right? Any sport and it could be even within school, right? It could be parents who are doctors and they want their kid to be nothing else but a doctor. And that's a lot of pressure on that specific individual. So we speak about, applying pressure from the parent side, the amount of support that is needed. I think the best way, that I can give an example of it, of my own personal experience, is that my dad traveled every single week to work and provide for us. But my mom was very adamant about, just giving me little tweaks in conversation of, hey, it's a Friday night. Your friends are going out to the movies, and all my friends invited me, and the movie starts at 8:30 p.m. And well, back in the day, the movies weren't 4 hours long; they were an hour and a half.
Mm-hmm.
But think about when you're going to finish that movie, and think about when you're going to get home because you have a game tomorrow morning, right? She would throw those little things out just to kind of keep me responsible and have myself kind of hold myself accountable towards towards certain things of what my priorities were. And that's really interesting. You said, because I had a conversation with a kid last night about that same exact thing. Just what to prioritize in certain situations and how parents can help out with prioritizing those decisions that are made by the kids. From the pressure standpoint, if you look at me and you watch me at a youth game and I have my 2 older kids that are playing, I am the furthest one away watching them at the corner. If there is anything that I see, I will wait until after the game or at halftime, and I'll pull them over and kind of give them a little piece of advice, but nothing to where, what are you doing? You need to do more, hustle more, because at the end of the day, that kid is the one that's going to make that decision of what he wants, right? Kids are going to be obsessed with the fact if they want to get better or not, right? And it's always going to be their decision. There's going to be a point in time where they get to an age to where then they're going to stop listening to their parents, and it's going to be about what they want.
Nick Alifi, go for it.
With these mentoring sessions that you have, is there a common thread that you're seeing with kids nowadays that like, no matter what the technical ability is there something that you're seeing, whether it's confidence, whether it's a lack of confidence, outside stressors? What's the common thread that you seem to be seeing amongst the people that you are mentoring?
Out of all the mentees that we have, you said it. Lack of confidence is number one. And self-acceptance, in my opinion, is number two. Self-acceptance to be comparing yourselves to others, not focusing on what you have in front of you, and looking at some kid who has, X amount of followers on Instagram because he does some really cool skill moves, or thinking this one kid is on the first team and you're on the third team, and you'll never be anything because that kid's already way above you, right? Those are the types of conversations that most kids have, and it's the comparison to others and lack of confidence, and it doesn't matter what situation they're in. That's usually the main theme. I would say for our more elite players, it is the knowledge and want of soccer IQ, right? How can I be better in understanding positioning? How can I be better in understanding the vision that I need, the awareness that I need on the field? But I would say the main theme and the main topic would always be confidence and self-acceptance for most of our kids.
Because I know that Parkey on Twitter had mentioned the phrase, set the kid up for the path, don't set the path up for the kid. Coco reminds us of that in the Twitch pitch this morning. And, I think a lot of times you have the parents who are wanting to set the path and set the guidepost. And it's like, okay, this is how you need to do things. And it ends up being detrimental in the long run, instead of letting the kid figure out who they are, both as an individual and as an athlete. It can be double damaging, for lack of a better phrase.
Most definitely. I think, one major and great piece of advice that I think my mom probably gave me when I was a kid and as I became a pro was, think best case scenario, plan for the worst, right? And I think that's always the mindset that we have to have, even as parents, right? You have to plan. You have to give your kids plans for the worst case scenario so they will be prepared. But you always want them to think the outcome is going to be the best possible. And that's kind of, the professional mindset that I think every professional athlete probably has, right? You're planning everything during that season. Okay, what if you ask that one question, if I don't get signed again to this renewal, or if I don't get this, what is our plan going to be? And you think of that from the very get-go. But you're not thinking that the whole entire season. You're thinking about how you can accomplish and how you can do everything for that ultimate goal and objective to happen. And I think that's a great piece of advice to always, as a parent, and even as a kid, you plan for the worst, but you always think best.
Jared Smith, you're next. Any topics on the table with Greg Garza and Beyond Goals Mentoring?
Yeah, so one of the guys we talked about a lot last year here was a guy like George Campbell, who was a bit of a late bloomer. Changed positions. He's coming through the academy, really jumped up physically with growth late in his teenage years versus what other kids might go through. How do you have those conversations with kids about, some guys are going to peak and not peak to say that that's as good as they get. Some guys will really hit that jump when they're a younger teenager, and other guys, it comes later when they just keep pushing and working at it. And how do you have that conversation with kids to keep them motivated in a sense?
Yeah. What a move! What a move, by the way, for George. That's a hefty price for a kid that still, I think, in my opinion, still needs a lot of experience within the game of play. So that's a lot of pressure to his shoulders for this next year. That's a lot of faith and belief that Montreal is obviously putting into him. And that's obviously another topic, right? Of dealing with that and going into a foreign country, because Montreal is its own place. He's going to have to learn French. He's going to have to, adapt to that culture pretty quickly as well. But I think George is the perfect example of whenever he first started training with the first team. And I tell people this all the time. I love people who prove us wrong. Guys that are veterans and guys that have kind of been through, the ropes of playing at a high level for a really long time. And I remember George's first training with us as a first team. And I remember thinking to myself, of all the kids that were there, he was probably one of the last few that I think probably would have made it. And that's my honest opinion. But I think you look at, as he continued to train with us and as he continued to develop within training with the first team, and that first year that he was with the first team, his mindset and his work ethic was out of this world. And so, you can never judge a book by its cover of just one first training, right? You get to know these kids and you get to know their mindset and what's behind of wanting and the willingness to learn and to put towards their own success. And Miles Robinson is another great example of that, right? Of seeing Miles within the first 2 seasons under Tata and playing a total of 4 games, 5 games total within the first 2 years as being a pro. And now look where he is. I mean, in my opinion, he's the most valuable center back that the U.S. men's national team has at the moment. But for him to also have the mindset of going through that phase of learning and the willingness and want to continue to build kind of their own legacy and their own story, that takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of resilience. We use that word constantly with our mentees. And to see those guys come out of it and transform. And you look at George Campbell and say, man, that kid transformed into something very special, and learn from the people that were around him. He had the patience, he had the resilience of continuously wanting to get better each and every day. And it's every day that counts when you're a pro. It's not just 1 week, it's not just a month, it's every single day that you can learn from. All
right, Nick, do you want to be the one to ask about the rebuild question for Atlanta United?
I mean,
what rebuild? We were talking about rebuild?
I think that here's the thing, Greg, is that I have some views on sort of the natural life cycle of teams, especially within the salary cap space, which is this cap is designed for people to go high, and then over a period of time you're going to dip down a bit, and the strength of the youth, the strength of your mid-level players on the team are going to be the ones who will prevent it from cratering. I don't know how to define a rebuild. I don't know if we would qualify this as a rebuild. Is it presumptuous of me to ask you would you define this as a rebuild, or would you define this as just a natural evolution? I know that's a very dangerous word here in this town. The natural evolution of the life cycle of a salary cap team.
Yeah. I mean, let's go into other sports.
Yep.
Right. Look at Atlanta Braves.
Mm-hmm.
Great example. You lose Freddie Freeman last year. Is it a rebuild?
Nope.
You lose Swanson this year. Is it a rebuild?
Nope.
because there's a core piece of group of guys that are there within Atlanta Braves that will probably they will still have an ability and a chance to still continue their success within the next couple of years. Within Atlanta United, you lose a lot of guys this year, right? That you could say are key guys to playing every single game, right? Some of the guys we're losing this year played every single game. Then you lose someone, I mean, obviously I think we can say it by now, right? You lose someone who will probably have a statue out of the stadium at some point in time, who I think deserves a statue outside the stadium. But with that said, do you still have a core group of guys that are there that you can say, okay, we can rebuild, we can rebuild around these core group of guys. Mm-hmm. And I think, you look at it and you say, okay, Miles Robinson has got to be at the top of that list. Brad Guzan has got to be at the top of that list. Ozzie Alonso has got to be at the top of that list. But where have these guys been the past year? They've been on injury lists, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have to, your core group of guys, Brooks Lennon is another guy who's probably that part of that core list. Even Andrew Gutman can probably go within that core group of list of guys who you can count on. Those are reliable guys. They are invaluable. There's only four guys that I mentioned right there. Mm-hmm. Everybody else is kind of tossed up in the air and saying, we're going to have to rebuild. I named the goalie and 4 defenders right there, right?
Out of a 23-man
roster.
Right. And that doesn't even include second team guys that are a part of the system. You're talking 30 on an MLS roster, 23 make it to week, and then 18 on game day. So yeah, you mentioned 4 out of 30 or 5 out of 30.
I'm mentioning 4 out of probably the most consistent playing, reliable, in my opinion, invaluable guys that you can count on. I think the rest is up, and just in my personal opinion, the rest is up for grabs, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I believe it is going to be a rebuild. You have to find it's a start, not necessarily from zero. It's not a start from scratch, but it is a start from 25%. I just named a quarter out of guys that will play. So I think it is going to be, you are going to have to make some pretty, obviously you have Thiago, right? That's still there. And I didn't mention his name because I think if there's any point in time to where you want to sell Thiago, it's got to be now, right?
If you get the offer that you can't refuse.
If you get the offer that you can, there is no better moment to get your money's worth at what his value is probably set to right now. I don't even want to know what it's set to right now. I don't even want to look at transfer market and see what his value is, because I know Atlanta will make money on him regardless. Mm-hmm. But his highest value is probably right now.
Oh, that World Cup bump
in his career. Does not matter if he played 5 minutes in the World Cup. Does not matter. It's his highest value is right now. So I think, with the names that I mentioned, I think, you have to build around those guys, and all of those guys, most of those guys are coming back from injury. So you have to, it's going to be I think it'll be a tough task as a fan now, right? As a fan, I think it'll be a tough task this year, and hopefully we can make some really good signings that come into play and are also invaluable to what Atlanta stands for, what Atlanta United stands for. And I think Atlanta United has to be a team every year that makes the playoffs, with the amount of fan base, with the amount of, just success that they have already achieved. And I think a great team of what you mentioned, of how teams, have that high and then kind of go through that down, is Sporting KC. Sporting KC, I always use them because they had a core group of guys back then, a few years ago, that were always the core. Then you get rid of Elias Sanchez. Then you
don't replace him.
And you get rid of other guys within that team that were so beneficial to their core group. And now you only look at it and you think, man, I think Graham Zusi is the only one part of that core group that is still there. And they are also in a phase of rebuild. And look at what last season was for them. It was very hard to watch such a successful MLS team that always makes the playoffs, not make the playoffs, maybe in the last 2 years. And so, yeah, I think you're fine. Atlanta United is finally in that phase to where, yeah, you're going to have to start making some signings that are, going to be invaluable to what Atlanta United stands for.
Jared Smith, I know that the real world turns into your driveway very quickly. Your last question.
And this is another side of that like, yeah, it's not as messy, but this is a thing that I've argued for the last year plus, I guess, on here, is because we had it brought up about guys moving on, about, and not just with Atlanta, with other teams, with the salary cap issue of, I've been a proponent for a while of just open the damn cap up. Change how you want to do DPs, change how you want to do monopoly money, change whatever you want, but open it up and let teams spend what they want to spend. And I think, aside from teams maybe loading up and other teams not loading up, I think you would end up with more continuity instead of, having somebody leave because the club has to save money somewhere. Guys are able to stay longer in one spot. And also, you could, a whole different conversation, but you could look at the way free agency works within MLS, to where guys can have a little more freedom to go where they want to go if they're out of contract.
Yeah, I will agree to disagree there, because I will say, if a club really wants a guy to stay, they will do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest, thing within sports. If there is a club that really wants this guy to stay, they will find a way.
Even with cap constraints.
They will find a way. You look at LA Galaxy for their time of where they were the absolute hero, they were the top of the league, and you would ask yourself, how do these guys continue to stay? Where are they getting this money from? Well, they're getting it from somewhere, but those guys continue to stay, and they continue to have that success. And I think that's a great example of it. I think. And at the end of the day, right, you see all these other teams, all the other teams within the MLS, we all follow the same rules, right? We all follow the same ruling of salary cap, and it's a chess match. It's a chess match on trying to figure out how much to pay one particular player and how you're going to get the most out of them, right? And you look at examples of Emerson Henman not being able to play the last couple of years and being on a very hefty contract. And now you release up some money right there, and now you're able to hopefully spread that out. And once again, I say, find people. You need to find industrial guys that are going to be invaluable to the team, and invaluable they are going to put in that work every single day, and they're going to be the most reliable guys that you can count on, not only in performing, but also in the locker room, being guys that are great to be around.
And I know we're heading into extra time here with Greg. Nicolifi, last question.
I think you and I are both soccer parents there, Greg. So back to the mentoring side of the business. What's something, it's one thing to say, okay, prepare the kid for the path, not the path for the kid. But what are some things that we can do as parents to maybe just take the step back and let the kids, to help foster the love of the game, other than trying to be, soccer parent analyst on the sideline? What can we do to help foster the love of the game?
Yeah, that's a good question. I always like to say, the power of positivity is by far the most important thing, right? Being positive with whatever the situation may be. Us as human beings, Michael says it all the time. We are wired and geared to have our, thoughts throughout the day, 80% negative and 20% positive. And us as humans and us as parents, how do we, how do we put that within our kids, of helping them think positively throughout every single situation that they're going through? And then the other big piece of me for me right there is, why do we play the game? Right. I always use the example of some kid asking me and my son, my 9-year-old son was standing right next to me. And the kid came up to me and he said, "Hey, your son's going to be a pro. He has to be a pro." And my son is sitting right there. And I said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, because you played pro, his grandpa played pro, and his uncle plays pro. He's got to follow in your path." And I asked that kid back and I said, well, why do you play soccer? And he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "It's a simple question. Why do you play soccer?" And he said, "Well, because I love it and because it's fun." And I said, "Well, guess what I did?" And I was fortunate and lucky enough to do it for 13 years, but guess why I played soccer? And he said, "Because you loved it and because it was fun." I said, "Yeah, I got to make a living out of it, but the only reason I played soccer was because I loved it and because it was fun." And that is the best answer that I think I could have given my 9-year-old son, of to always play the game, not to become a pro. Always play the game, not to make tons of money and do all these cool things, but play the game because it is fun and because you love it. And as a parent, that is the most important message that I think we can always give our kids. Yeah, do we want our kids to succeed? Yeah, do we want them to do extremely well on the field? But at the end of the day, I'm sure you played the game at a young age, and I guarantee you played it because you probably might still play it today. You still play it because you love the game and it's fun, not necessarily to win, right? And so, I think at the end of the day, that's the most important message that we can give to our kids.
All right, now that we're early in 2023, what's the latest with Beyond Goals, Greg? What's going on?
Yeah, everything's great. Just continuing on from what we did in 2022. Continue to try and inspire these young kids and help them understand the values and responsibilities and ways to hold themselves accountable throughout their own youth journeys, and setting them up for success in whatever it may be, whether it be sports and soccer for the rest of their lives, or whether it be whatever they put their minds to and want to achieve in their lives. So just serving as a mentor, serving as someone who can be as big as an inspiration with the platform that we've been given, and continuing on from what we created.
And we will continue to talk to you and Parky on a weekly basis here on the Friday Free Kick. It's always great to catch up with you, my friend, to kind of peel back the curtain on not just mentoring, but the game in general and everything going on in your orbit. Greg, is always great to have you here on the show, and we'll catch up next week.
Absolutely.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Greg Garza, he's going to go drink his coffee now. And so Greg is he's just going to have his coffee. He's going to try and hang out for a little bit. He's just doing his thing on a Friday. Hanging, and he and Parky coming on every other week. It's fantastic.